A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
We're about to launch into a conversation about the past in a very significant way. Dinosaurs are back in recent headlines. A massive dinosaur graveyard nicknamed the River of Death has been discovered in Alberta, Canada, containing the remains of an estimated 10,000 Pachyrhinosaurus. That's a relative of Triceratops. A creation perspective today on how Christians who see Genesis as history think about huge fossil discoveries like this. The site of the River of Death is called Pipestone Creek and is believed to be the result of, guess what? A flash flood. Some questions to pose today, like how scientists come up with an estimated 72 million years as the age of those bones. Well, there's clearly a big gap, isn't there, between the evolutionary scientist view of 72 million years and the biblical timeline that dates a worldwide Genesis flood to something like 4,500 years. So what is the creation response to the dinosaur find? And can you trust the science around dating? We're back today with John Mackay, the creation guy. He's the founder of Creation Research with the Brisbane Creation Discovery Centre and the Aussie Creation Museum Jurassic Ark. And a special guest also joining us today, Josiah Rossick, who is, you've met him before, a snake expert. In fact, more specially defined as someone who is gaining expertise in ecology around animals and plants. He's a reptile handler. We'll be talking to him, but a special welcome back to 2020. First of all, to you, John Mackay. Welcome.
G'day. And it is good to be back. And Josiah, by the way, for those who are listening, is our youngest member in Creation Research.
Fabulous stuff. Hey, welcome along, Josiah.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Now that he's mentioned you're the youngest member, I got to say, how old are you?
19 years of age.
19 years of age.
And good looking.
Yeah, well, if we had the image for listeners today, yes, fine, good looking young man with a heart for God. I know that because you wouldn't be working with this man if you didn't. And you're studying at this time,
Yes.
ecology. Tell us about your studies very briefly.
So ecology is basically the study of how animals interact with their environment. So the lines of work include stuff like conservation, management, looking at animal populations and how they interact with the ecosystems that they live within. So you might look at whale populations and how they're doing in response to ocean temperatures, or you might look at plant populations at different altitudes, that kind of research. So basically looking at animals now, plants as well, because that's my major in ecology, so plants and animals. And it's mainly conservation work, but it's good because you get to learn a lot about all different animal classes and plant classes as well.
And your day job is as a reptile handler, a snake expert.
Yes.
So the most dangerous snakes or the less dangerous ones?
Well, I only do pythons at the moment, so they're non-venomous. John definitely wouldn't like it if I rocked up to his museum with a taipan or something. No. But yes, I do like educational shows with my pythons. I also have a little monitor lizard now. But yeah, it's mainly snakes.
All right, we're going to be talking about dinosaurs today. Let's get into our dinosaur conversation here. And the story I mentioned there in my introduction, that's really, Alberta in Canada, drowned dinosaurs. What are the experts saying that you're thinking carefully about here, John Mackay?
Okay, well, John Mackay, the creation guy, is a little older than 19, and he has been to Alberta many times. And in quite a few of my early visits, I went to this location that's currently in the news, re-promoted by the BBC, who make it sound like it's a new discovery. But as I was showing Josiah, I have a picture of a lovely diagram showing dinosaurs drowning and geologists digging them up. And I took that picture in 2008. So this has been the theory for a long time, even by the local secular geologists, because they are stuck beautifully preserved skeletons. It's a pachyrhinosaurus, by the way, which simply means big-nosed dinosaur. So it looks a bit like a rhinoceros, really. But it's so well preserved, and so many bones and water creatures and dumped rocks and trees. I showed you some of the trees I'd found, the bones I'd found, and it definitely is a catastrophic dump. And so the local geologists for ages have said there's got to be a big torrential flood. Now, it's probably only just hit the BBC because, I'll be honest, and I've told you this before, the floods are a no-no in most geology because Charles Lyell decided he was going to get rid of Moses out of science, and Moses, Genesis, Noah, the flood, the judgment of God. And so therefore they pushed it aside. But it makes such good footage on the BBC. And I've been there and done that and seen it, and it really does make good footage.
Okay. Is it an accidental admission, do you think, that there's a major flood event, a flash flood they call it?
It's a flash flood for sure. I think the BBC, as they wanted to reactivate their Walking with Dinosaurs, needed something new, right? Having models, having computer illustrations. Wow, what if you can have dead dinosaurs by the thousands, right? Now that's got spectacular public appeal. You can't go as far as Noah's flood, but perhaps a local flood would do, right? So that's I think that's where they're getting it. But as I said, I've got a couple of quotes from books in our article, our newsletter we're producing. The books were written in Canada in 2008 saying exactly the same things.
So a freak weather event flooded a popular migration route and killed 10,000, a 10,000-strong herd. Now, these are not little, tiny dinosaurs, are they? These are big. Actually,
No.
They grow to something like 6 metres long, 20 foot long, 6 metres long, and weighing as much as 2 tonnes. So
Yep.
10,000 of them. So you've actually been there.
I've been all over Alberta, right, and all over many of the dinosaur sites. So it's a big advantage when I'm doing debates because you can say, been there, done that. Here's one. Have a look, right? And so what you've got is not just the Pachyrhinosaurus, right? You've got dinosaurs all over, buried in marine deposits or be in water deposits, and they picked this one because the locals say there's no other explanation, right? It had to be drowned, and they've got portraits or paintings anyway of all these big horny rhinocephalosaurus, and they're trying to swim. It's like having a tank swim, and they're just going to sink to the bottom. They're that big and heavy. But unlike the other drowning deposits, the dinosaurs with long necks usually show you they've drowned if their neck bends back and their tail bends up. But these guys have got really short necks and really short tails, so they're just buried whole.
They're the first ones to drown.
Yeah, that's right.
You've been to Pipestone Creek. If you're standing there and you're looking out across all of this, are you seeing bones that are coming up through the ground?
If you want to have a look afterwards, I was just showing Josiah bone after bone after bone, not just bones, but bones with trees, bones with mussel shells, right? Bones with contorted mud. So they've been picked up, carried along, dumped, buried on a huge scale. But the fact is, that's just a small example of the dinosaur beds all through Canada, right, from the Rockies right across the halfway back towards Toronto.
Now, one of the most significant and obvious questions that I know that there'll be a lot of listeners who are hanging on the edge of their seat right now, and they're saying these secular evolutionary scientists are saying this event happened 72 million years ago. But when I listen to John Mackay, the creation guy, and he says that the world and the universe was created on a biblical Genesis timeline, which is a very short period, certainly compared to 72 million years, how do we make sense of the idea that this flood that we talk about fairly frequently happened only around 4,500 years ago?
Okay, one of the things that we do in creation research, we called it that. For one reason, we actually go and do the research. So I've had Joseph Hubbard on the program here over the years, our English student. He's doing his PhD in rocks dated by collagen out of dinosaur bones. Now, he recently went to a conference in the USA. He had his paper up on the wall. He is a junior scientist. He's right down at the bottom, really. So he gets a tiny little display. And it was quite interesting because what he's been doing is showing there are chemicals in dinosaur bones that are detectable by the world's best equipment, and chemicals that will have fallen apart after 4,000 or 5,000 years, right? And he reported a funny event when one of the secular scientists came up, read his paper, and talked to him and said, wow, he said, you better not let those wretched creationists find out about this. Yeah. Because the scientists could see if you can find collagen, a short-lived chemical inside dinosaur bones, they did not die millions of years ago. So that's what we do, not just the critical negative, here's why you're wrong, guys, at 17 million, but here's why we're right. The actual evidence shows we're right. The dinosaur bones are not millions of years old.
So in Alberta, is it a major resource for researchers to do this sort of thing, or do they look at the bones protruding from the earth and say it's 72 million years old, but we better be careful about how we actually extract anything from those bones? Surely there must be someone who's looking to see if there's any living matter in those bones.
There are just a couple of people. You've got to remember, in all of science, you do the science which pays. You do the science which brings money in. Now, I hate to say this, but it's a real factor. So unless you've got a rich uncle, becoming a paleontologist is not a very rewarding career. But I could take you to Alberta. I remember standing under a cliff, and there's an overhang in the cliff about 6 metres wide, and there's a whole dinosaur upside down. Now, I could say, wow, let's go and get the equipment. Okay, I'm 200 kilometres from the nearest town, so the cost of getting the equipment there is unbelievable, and digging up upside down for weeks is again going to cost you a fortune. So no, there's not too many people going looking for living stuff in bones. Mary Schweitzer was the first, right? She's on record as because Jack Horner, the guy who's one of the best dinosaur diggers, let her loose, and she found some life chemicals in one of the bones, and nobody believed her to start with. And she had to prove a point over and over and over again until they said, oh, it's true, the hemoglobin, the collagen, whatever, it must last a lot longer than we think it does. Right? And that's why we've got professors on our board who say, no, I'm a professor in this, it does not last longer than 1,000 to 2,000 years.
We'll get on to biblical foundations, but if we're just in this particular part of our, as we're laying a foundation for the conversation here, is there a problem here with the assumptions you make about a find like this that makes the difference between what the evolutionist says is 72 million years and what the creationist says is 4,500?
Okay, that's one reason I'm going to leave a pile of these Open Day brochures out the front, because we have our Open Day coming up, and you can come to our museum at Acacia Ridge, right, free for the Open Day, and see the whole list of assumptions there on dinosaurs. We have a whole wall of dinosaurs, and including fossil dinosaurs, right, and they can come and learn what you assume. Now, I say that because Josiah will be doing his reptiles and showing you what people assume about the poisonous ones, etc. I'll be doing dinosaurs, showing you with the fossils what people assume, and it'll be up on the wall, and here's the chief one. I always encourage young students, if they're going to do a debate, listen to what your opponent didn't say, right? The things they're trying hard for you not to notice. So when you have a bone, hey, here's a 72 million year old bone from Piper Creek. Oh, how do you know that? Were you there? No. Well, how do you know that? Oh, because of the bones aren't radioactive. How do you know that? The carbon-14 doesn't go back that far. They're trying to impress you with their superficial knowledge, which if you dig and dig and dig, you'll find is really based on the assumptions of a lawyer by the name of Charles Lyell. And I've said this plenty of times, and if you go to creationresearch.net, click on the Q&A or on the fact file, insert LYELL. You not only did he wrote the book on how to get away with this by simply saying scientists are only allowed to study the present. They can't have any historical source, right? And what he did was eliminate Moses, and he's on record, my aim is to get rid of Moses. So you students out there, you parents, you need to know that most of our state education is based on Charles Lyell's assumption we've got to get rid of Moses out of school, out of science, out of physics, out of maths. And Moses, of course, is 6 days of creation, Noah's flood, and that's a really good starting point for finding dinosaurs that are drowned.
This is 2020 with Neil Johnson, helping you make sense of life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
Let's just divert our conversation briefly to snakes. This is an area of your expertise, and you're working primarily with pythons, but you're very intensely interested in snakes and their poison. What can you share with us, Josiah, that listeners can understand about snakes?
So, we live in the perfect country if you want to know about snakes.
Yes.
Very, from my personal experience, very misunderstood animals. Especially in this country, we'll have a predisposition of fear around snakes. Now, I work with pythons, like you said, and they're all non-venomous, but I have had experience with venomous ones as well. I had to do my venomous handling course for some credit. So I've worked with taipans, browns, red bellies, and that sort of stuff. And certainly, in captivity, they definitely have a bit of a nasty disposition, but I go out in the wild quite often and I'll encounter a lot of different snakes. And more often than not, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. But I don't leave them alone very often. So, but yes.
We often like to talk about the venom of snakes, and this is a particular interest of yours.
Yes. So from a biblical, we'll start from just a secular point of view. We're taught that snake venom is a modified saliva with certain proteins in it, like phospholipase A2 that breaks down the skin and breaks down tissue. And that's basically what causes the venom effect, or your neurotoxins and hemotoxins. That's what the secular scientists taught, that over millions of years they evolved their basically saliva to turn into venom, and then that became injectable and whatnot, which isn't too crazily far off the biblical understanding. I believe Joseph, John Mackay's, the guy that works with John Mackay you mentioned before, he's done some pretty good YouTube videos out there that talk about it. And one in particular that I believe as well that he went into about the origin of snakes' venom is around how they got that venom. And basically it has to do with how they would eat before. So if you look at like a snake, it usually eats quite large food. So you've got something like an eastern brown that'll eat a full-grown rat. Now the venom, while yes, it can be used to kill the rat, it also has another purpose, and that's to help break down the tissue of the rat so it doesn't choke them while they're eating it, so it isn't too big and doesn't break any skin. So before the fall, if snakes weren't eating rats and whatnot, if they were eating fruits or if they were eating anything else, they're still limited by their jaw size. So what that venom will do, if they inject something too large, it'll help break it down while they're eating it. So the whole idea is that venom didn't evolve. It was there to be used as a good, something good to help them eat. Whereas now it's used for bad, basically, because they're eating live animals they have to use to take down those animals.
Venom is good unless you're on the receiving end of some snake fangs in your left leg.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, we're only not too far out from news. Come back to the dinosaurs here for a few moments, because we want to reflect on the biblical account in Genesis and how we understand these sorts of headlines. And even as you say, John, they're brought up and they're brought back, and they're made to look like it. They're all brand new. But the Genesis account and how we understand dinosaurs in all of that. A quick response for you.
As Josiah said, starting point is Genesis. Everything was very good, including venom in snakes. So it had always look for an alternative use for T-Rex teeth. the snake venom, it will always be better than what's happening now. So most of them are in survival mode in a world where you're liable to bite them back, so they will use their teeth. But I like Josiah, I've got red-belly black snakes down my backyard. I have no trouble with them at all. I've had them brush up against my leg. I don't hurt them, they don't hurt me. But of course I don't want them to bite me either. Now the same is true for the big dinosaurs. You got T-Rex, he's portrayed on the screen as a savage killer. Now, the guy who's done the most work on T-Rexes ran a brilliant exhibition at the British Museum in which he said there's no way T-Rex could have been a big killer, a savage killer. His teeth fall out. If he was going to savage you, he would have lost half his teeth. It's a very short lifespan. And he said he couldn't run a long way because his legs are too thick. And everyone knows strongly muscled legs in Olympic people, you don't run, you lift weights, right? And he said his eyeballs are round, so he couldn't have seen you from a distance. And he just tore apart the whole story that the dinosaur was bad, but in reality, everything about the dinosaur was good originally, and things have gone downhill, including our treatment of them. We probably killed them up, but called them dragons in those days.
Mark from Young in New South Wales, John, says, "Good day, Neil. A question for John Mackay. My grandchildren have books, even 3D ones, which show more dinosaurs than I can imagine. Are these books truthful in their pictures and attributes of these supposed creatures? Thank you." Any thoughts here?
Number one, you'll find the number of dinosaurs in the Dinosaur Encyclopedia keeps going up and down. For the simple reason, the experts will disagree whether two creatures are different species, or one is a juvenile and the other is an adult, or one is a male and the other is a female. So it increases and decreases depending on which experts are in the top of the pile at the moment. Secondly, when we find a dinosaur, the problem with the biology is it's dead. It's not going anywhere. I found a neck bone and heaps of bones of a titanosaur. I know it's a titanosaur because we sent the specimen to the world's dinosaur expert in the British Museum, and he said, "You've found a titanosaur." Right, now that's the one with the really big long neck, right? And right alongside it was a marine dinosaur. Okay, land dinosaur, marine dinosaur. So out in Western Queensland near the Northern Territory border, we have evidence that there were big land-dwelling and water creatures mixed up dead at the same place. So you can tell from the bones what it would have looked like. If the bones are complete, you can tell how impressive it might have been. So hence this 10,000 Pachyrhinosaurus. We know what they look like because they were buried so quickly. Secondly, when you talk about 3D models, the 3D models, if they only found the skeleton, then yes, we're guessing about the skin, we're guessing about the colour, we're guessing about all of those. But if we have the whole skeleton, the reconstruction is pretty accurate. As to how many, your guess is as good as mine. It goes up from 4,000 to 14,000, depending on who you're talking about. When you're looking at 3D models, if you want a Christian perspective, I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Dinosaurs, What Happened to Them. We took my young grandchildren to Jurassic Ark in comic form and showed them, and there are 3D models in that book. So they can actually order dinosaurs from Creation Research or phone it up and get it there and actually see the dinosaurs in 3D. It's spectacular. I'll stand up out of the page. It's amazing what the technology can do today. But in terms of the numbers, we know the minimum numbers. The maximum number keeps on changing. There were a lot of dinosaurs, but what they did in life, we do not know because they're all dead.
Okay, thanks to Mark in Young in New South Wales. Talkback line open 1800 316 316. Another text from Bruce who says, a question for John, has there ever been found evidence of fossilised humans from Noah's flood? And if not, why do you think this is? Surely if there was evidence of humans fossilised with dinosaurs, the evolution argument of millions of years would be debunked. Thoughts here for Bruce?
Okay. If you found fossil people alongside dinosaurs, it probably doesn't help you time-wise because you have to date both of them then. But what it would help you is find something which is at odds with the evolutionary story, which says dinosaurs evolved millions of years and were totally extinct before there were people here. So clarify the question there. And I'll repeat here a lesson that I learned very well. I actually used to edit the Creation magazine, and one year I published an article on a fossil woman found in Guadeloupe, right? Now, I got into awful trouble with the British Museum for doing that because they said, we used to have this on display, but we didn't take it off because of Charles Darwin, and away they went. And then in part of this conversation, I discovered that the British Museum had never been to Guadeloupe to check it out. And neither had the guy who wrote the article I published. So John Mackay packed his bags, took off to South America, and it's wonderful to be able to do this and get to the place and check the stuff that's there. Now, I reported back to the British Museum, and I asked them two things. One, where is the skeleton and can I see it? And number two, how many human fossils do you know of? Now, I was talking to Dr. Chris Stringer, and I'm going to tell you what his answer was because I've used this in debates. I've used it on the BBC. Not once has he contradicted it at all, right? Because I said, okay, this is definitely a human fossil. It was a woman, right, buried in Shelley limestone. And I said, how many fossil people do you know of? And he said, about 30,000. 30,000. Right? Now, this includes the Neanderthals, it includes cave deposits, it includes the fossils from Guadeloupe, etc. So there are actually lots of them. Right? Now, it is totally impossible at the secular level to attribute them to Noah's flood because they don't believe in Noah's flood. Right? You've got to realise, even if it's a flood deposit like these dinosaurs, they are not going to mention Noah's flood because that's a no-no. I still remember my first day at Queensland University where the geology professor said, we're not going to discuss any such rubbish as creation or Noah's flood. Okay, what do I do now? So in reality, that's a no-no. So what you'll find is there are lots and lots of fossils, and I'm pretty sure that if you check every one of the 30,000, you will come up with quite a few. But they're all people. They're so recognised as people, including the ones that are allegedly alongside dinosaur deposits or down mines in the USA, buried in blue azurite, copper, and all those sort of things.
Okay, thank you so much to Bruce for posing that question. Adam in Warhope in New South Wales says, good morning, Neil. A question for John. If he knows anything about the giant turtle fossils found at high altitude, alluding to the great flood depositing them, I'm having difficulty finding exactly where this discovery was and when. So any thoughts here for Adam?
Okay, Adam, I likewise couldn't know exactly where that one supposedly found. One reason is that most geologists who find a bit or a portion of a fossil are very reluctant to tell you where they found it, right? It's a trade secret, known only to the experts. But when it comes to fossils, I've got fossil turtles. They're easy to recognise. They look like dead turtles. Secondly, you'll find there are many giants in the fossil record, and giant turtles included, right? 5 or 6 metres across, right? And that's a big turtle. And they are, you can see some that size in museums. That they are there. They're well known, but they don't show any evidence of doing anything except get big there, now smaller, now smaller. So turtles have devolved in size particularly, but they are not extinct. In terms of finding turtles on the tops of mountains, you find all sorts of fossils, including on Mount Everest. You find all sorts of seashells. So we know that that rock was formed below water. It doesn't necessarily mean water was above Mount Everest because many of these mountains have lifted up since the flood. One mountain I know in Russia lifted 300 feet, 100 meters in one earthquake. Right, so much of this is post-Noah's flood movement, but nevertheless, it is rock which is formed underwater. So now it can't help you with the location of that giant turtle, but there are quite a few giant turtles that are found around the planet in the rocks.
Thank you to Adam in Warhope for that question by text on 0447 488 316. Our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. Hey, John, come back to one of the things that was posed in Bruce's question about humans and dinosaurs coexisting together, because there's something significant that I know we've drawn attention to before. But while we're talking about what's happened in Alberta, and we're talking about dinosaurs, and we're talking about the age that the evolutionist might come up with compared to the age that we might say in a biblical account, because the Bible does have reference to creatures that we would say are dragons or dinosaurs. What do you understand about the behemoth and the leviathan that are actually there recorded in the book of Job in the Bible?
Okay, if you don't mind me passing some of that question on to my reptile colleague there, because he just gave a sermon last week at Margate Baptist. Good work there, even though your notes sort of got all mixed up. You deal with behemoth and with all these other ones too, don't you, and reptiles, and the fact that the guy who invented the word dinosaur actually called them dragons. Mm-hmm. What's your answer to that there, mate?
Josiah.
So, in regards to the behemoth and leviathan in the book of Job, it's interesting. Leviathan, the Bible uses the word, the Hebrew word tannin to describe leviathan, and that's translated from the words sea serpent or sea dragon, I believe. So it's pretty well agreed along the Creation Museum board that, Creationist board, that Leviathan was most definitely a some sort of aquatic dinosaur. It definitely wasn't a hippo or anything like that, like some people would suggest. Behemoth, most likely a large sauropod, because we have Job's description. I mean, there's no other animal with a large tail like a cedar tree, especially cedars from back in Job's time, would have been very long. But most definitely, yeah, they are given dinosaur descriptions, and that use of the Hebrew word tannin to describe a sort of sea dragon or sea serpent definitely gives a lot of credence to the argument.
And the key here, coming back to you, John, is the fact that we can see, even from the very Bible that so many Christians will open every day, that there is the human element alongside dinosaurs, and with strong evidence that those references of a behemoth and a leviathan are in that dinosaur category, that this is evidence itself, isn't it, that humans lived alongside dinosaurs?
You see, the point you've raised is a very important one. The general rule in science is that the Bible is not evidence, right? That is the general rule. In fact, I remember doing a debate in Tasmania, and the professor of geology, science, etc., at the University of Hobart said, "In science, we don't take any authority as a reference point." And I said, "Do you state that?" Right. So in other words, it's an arbitrary rule, and he just lost that debate big time, because what he just said is we scientists are our own authority, and the first scientists, like the people who invented the classification system of fossils, used the Bible as their authority, because the Bible says not only test everything, it says we're made in God's image and we can actually see what's there. And it's reality, right? You can test the truth that's out there. So science began with the authority of Scripture, and when you read through there, God made Adam, He made Eve, He made everything very good. None of the creatures were killers, no matter how big they grew, right? Adam patted a titanosaur on its back, right? They would have all been friendly. They wouldn't have stepped on you. There was no thorns, none of that. And then man sins, and it goes downhill until the flood, which is the first time you're going to get fossils forming. Right, and that's the point where geology and Bible part ways, because geology has a rule: no Moses, no Noah's flood, no God who judges the women who want their babies aborted.
Okay, and an anonymous texter is saying, my child asked me if there were dinosaurs in the Bible before the flood. So I think we've comprehensively answered that. Yeah. Yes, dinosaurs are in the Bible. So, I mean, this is one of those things, I suppose, because particularly little boys, but little girls too, love playing with dinosaurs. Does this create a wonderful opportunity to share truth about the Bible and about God? And does it lead into a gospel conversation within your own family, John?
It certainly does. So that I remember one of my relatives who was raised outside of the church, and we took him to Jurassic Ark, and I've still got a lovely picture of him holding a dinosaur tooth, and you can see that all of the cobwebs of unbelief are washed away, and it's not long after that when he becomes a believer and goes and gets himself baptized, right? So it does change, because if you've got a wrong view of history, you've got a wrong view of the future. And it's not just a question of Israel versus the Arabs, it's a question of God's judgment on the planet, because he got the right to judge, right? Because he made it. So you've got to see that whole perspective. So don't waste the opportunity. That's why we promoted the dinosaur book before. Use it and change their wrong perspective of history so they can get the right perspective of Jesus coming again as the only long-term cure for peace. So come along and listen to Josiah too on our open day on the 19th of July. He'll have his snakes there, won't you, Josiah?
Yes, indeed.
And you'll answer questions like, did they all have legs in the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff.
Okay, well, leave that one to the side. Just to stay with this, the idea of a 10,000 strong herd of dinosaurs that are killed by a freak weather event, a flood. This would be the time when we would say that perhaps the majority of dinosaurs died out as Christian believers. But are there any other dimensions here as to what happened to the dinosaurs? Because I know there's a lot of people who think that there was an asteroid that hit the Earth and all of a sudden that destroyed the dinosaurs. There's other sorts of theories about, we ate them. What are you thinking about what happened to the dinosaurs?
Okay, well, having been to quite a few of the world's meteorite craters, you will find that even the biggest one, which must have been an impressive explosion, it must have also created a pile of dust that went up there and probably changed the climate for a few years. But in reality, there's no evidence that it killed off the dinosaurs. You have to not only kill them, you then have to bury them on a huge scale, and a meteoric explosion, a crater, won't do that. So therefore, Noah's flood comes back to being contender number one. And secondly, after Noah's flood, remember what God told Noah: from now there'll be winter, there'll be summer, there'll be climate change, right? There'll be ice, there'll be snow, there'll be flood, there'll be drought. And after that, you get local events that will make it hard for every creature, including dinosaurs.
Okay, when we're looking at the Bible, and we're confident that there were dinosaurs because of references like that one in Job, when we're confident in the Bible, confident then to talk about the message that comes when you put the Old Testament with the New, when you see that there are some things that contradict modern-day science, and then you look at New Testament, and this takes us off in a little bit of a different angle, but the power of God speaking into almost to think about miracles, changing the way that things happen when you think with a natural mind, that miracles don't happen, that the creation of the world and the creation of the universe has come from an almighty creator. Do these things sort of contribute to our appreciation of what it is to have faith in God?
It certainly does. Remember, we had Pentecost just a couple of Sundays ago, right? Now, Pentecost is an almost forgotten date in many Christian calendars, but it's the date the Holy Spirit was given. And it's Peter's conversion. Remember Peter the fisherman who chopped servants' ears off, and Jesus, the Son of God, put it straight back on. You think, well, not even medical benefits could do that. And then later when Peter gets really saved and he meets Jesus after the resurrection, etc., he becomes the apostle who goes around, and the guy begs for money. And he said, well, I don't have any money to give you, but I do have. And he heals him in the name of Christ. And so you see Peter, whose faith was so wavering, changed because the Holy Spirit was given and came and dwelt within him, and you see a real change. And that's what we need to see in the church. Trust in the Word of God, trust in the God who is the Word, who became flesh and dwelt amongst us and did all those wonderful things, but then he passed on the Holy Spirit, so that some of us will have gifts to do this, gifts to do that. John Mackay's gift seems to be digging up dinosaurs and training young men to do the same, and that's wonderful as well. But yes, it really does change your view of the future. It changes what you'll pray for Israel at the moment.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.